Today's hymn on the theme of the high priesthood of Christ is a wonderful hymn by Isaac Watts, who wrote his hymns in the 18th century. And we've been saying that the doctrine of the office of the Lord Jesus as our high priest is absolutely central to praise and worship. And sadly, it's the absence of a focus on this doctrine, both in teaching and especially in contemporary praise and worship, that is certainly to my mind one of the great marks of the decline in the quality of praise and worship and the songs that we use for it in the last decades really of the Christian church. Although a lot of people would feel that the increasing accessibility of songs and great atmosphere and large numbers of people singing is maybe a mark of something positive, of progress, I sadly see it as quite the opposite. And part of the inspiration or conviction behind Adullam's Cave music is it's certainly not that people should sing more hymns or more psalms, which would be great, but it's a conviction that there's a need for a reformation in the church in the area of worship and praise. And I hope to say a bit more about that in some of the following posts. But it's a desperate need, it's a pressing need. And it's when we recognize how many of, for instance, these hymns by Isaac Watts and others on the priesthood of Christ there have been for past generations to draw on, both in personal worship and in corporate worship, we realize how badly off we are today. Of course, there's that great hymn, Before the Throne of God Above, which is a wonderful hymn, and it was actually written a couple of centuries ago. Many people may not realize that and think it's a contemporary hymn. The tune's contemporary, but the words were from a hymn that you'll find in a number of the best hymn books. That stands out really as one of the exceptional hymns on the priesthood of Christ. But I like to suggest that theme should be a regular theme in our praise and worship, because not only is our praise not acceptable to God because of our sin and our fallenness, it's not acceptable because we are creatures. And the starting point in all worship must be the holiness of God. God is not just some kind of sort of superhuman. We take human qualities and extend them to the ultimate, and that's what God is like. God is totally other. He is a totally different kind of being. That's what we mean by saying God is transcendent, and that is part of his holiness. And we are absolutely unable to approach such a holy God, not only because of sin, but because we are totally different beings. And unless God provides a way for us to graciously to approach him, and the whole message of the Bible, Old and New Testament, is that unless he provides a mediator, someone apart from us through whom we may come, and someone through whom he comes to us, someone who is like us, but not with our limitations, and certainly not with our sin, but someone who is also like him, we cannot come. And no matter how enthusiastic, sincere praise and worship might be, no matter how biblical the words that may be sung, it is not acceptable worship and praise. In fact, it stinks before God. He has to reject it and judge it if it was not for the mediator. And of course, the great theme in the Old Testament in all worship is the role of the high priest. And this is what comes out in this particular hymn, how the high priests had to offer regular sacrifices, not of their own blood, but of animals. They had to be repeated again and again, and they had to offer for their own sin. But all of that ritual and the role of the great high priest was pointing to the great mediator, our great high priest, the Lord Jesus. And so just as the high priest in Israel was central to their worship, Jesus is and must be central in all our worship, all our prayer, all our approaches to God must be through him, or they are completely unacceptable. And yet, on the other hand, when they are through him, no matter how imperfect they may be, no matter how terrible we may feel about ourselves, how inadequate we may feel about ourselves, God's grace will always receive us, and the throne of judgment becomes a throne of grace when we come through our great high priest. Jesus, in you our eyes behold 1,000 glories more than richest gems and polished gold the sons of Aaron bore. They first their bone burnt offerings brought to purge themselves from sin. Your life was pure, without a spot, your human nature clean. Fresh blood was offered every day, and on the altar spilt. But your one offering takes away forever all our guilt. Their priesthood passed through several hands, for mortal was their race. Your never-changing office stands, eternal as your days. Once in the circuit of a year, with blood but not their own, they did within the veil appear before God's earthly throne. But Christ with his own powerful blood ascends above the skies, and in the presence of our God presents his sacrifice. Jesus, the King of glory, reigns on Zion's heavenly hill. Behold the Lamb that has been slain, Jesus, our high priest still. He ever lives to intercede before his Father's face. Trust him, my soul, your cause to plead, nor doubt his Father's grace.